So today we have a great opportunity to speak to two ladies who worked on the book Planter for March, Pharma Eva's Green Garden Life. We've got author Jacqueline Briggs Martin, or Jackie as we like to call her, and we've got Christy Hale with us today. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's morning for you and afternoon for me. So I want to start with Jackie, and I would like for you to share about your maybe your agricultural background. You grew up on a farm.
I did. I grew up on a dairy farm in Maine. We had Holstein cows, which I did not milk, but they did have to be milked twice a day, every day. So we did not take a lot of trips and we did not take a lot of vacations. But I loved being on the farm. I loved going for walks down the lane to a batch of pine trees. I loved the smell of hay, and there was so much that I loved about being on the farm that I think it has really shaped and directed me to write about growing food and making food and to be interested in plants and food.
Wonderful. Will you tell us a little bit about Eva? I love in this book that it starts with the sentence, my friend Eva. Instead of just telling us about her, you're describing your friend. Can you tell us a little bit about our main character in the book, Eva?
Well, the thing that I first noticed about Eva when I first met her was that she makes friends instantly. And I went to her farm to walk around and get an understanding of how she farms. And I was there for a couple of hours. And by the time I left, I felt like we were friends. And at one point in the book, there was going to be a closing, and I think maybe there still is, um, that Eva will be your friend too after you have read this book. So that was one reason for starting with my friend Eva, but it to be able to have those bookends. But it's really true about Eva that if you go to her place and are interested in what she does, you will become her friend. She's quick to share what she knows and what she grows. So if, as we were walking through her farm, her 2-acre farm, she would pluck a couple of leaves off a plant and say, here, try this, you'll like it. And then we take another 20 steps and here, try this, you'll like it. And we put that in the book, that try this motif, because it's so Eva. The other a piece I want to expand on is sharing what she knows. So many people, when I was out there for the book party, a lot of people that Eva that have worked for Eva came to the party. And it was clear that she has mentored so many young farmers. And she's a guru for them. And they were so happy to celebrate this book with her. But she's just constantly sharing food or sharing knowledge with people. And that has led her to be a great community builder. She not only grows food, but she grows communities. And it's kind of like Johnny Appleseed. She, who grew apple trees, she just does it. That's who she is. Communities grow up around her.
Wonderful. You know, that's a really great answer because here in North Carolina, the average age of our farmers is pretty up there. It's close to 60 years old. And I like what you said about she mentors young folks that might be interested in farming or agriculture in her community. And I agree with you. The theme of community is throughout the book, which I think is a really strong theme in agriculture as a whole. And our farmers here in North Carolina are certainly, we've got some great characters and some great personalities as well. And you can feel her personality shine through the book, especially that community theme. I noticed that you mentioned she wanted you to try everything on the farm, which reminds me of one of your other books that was also featured in our book planter program about Miss Alice Waters. So I'd like to ask you, what other than food, what do your food heroes like Alice Waters, Roy Choi, and Eva, what do they have in common?
You know, I think what they have in common has to do with food and community. I think they see food as a way to build community. Alice Waters, when she started her restaurant, just wanted a place where her friends could come and have good food, a kind of a community center. She envisioned her restaurant as being. And Roy Choi, when he began the food truck that served the Korean barbecue inside a taco, talked about the community of people that formed as they were waiting in line. People from all over Los Angeles got to know each other as they were waiting in line for Roy's food. And they're all different kinds of people who had in common that they were willing to wait for this delicious food. So I think that though I did not choose them, these people with that idea of community in mind, but it's there. It's there.
Great. Yeah, community food definitely brings us all together. And it reminds me of when we have grandmothers and great grandmothers and the whole family joins around the table.
Yes.
Christy,
Yes.
I would like to ask you, is there anything that surprised you about this project or maybe Farmer Eva in particular?
I'm not sure I'm surprised as much by her. I admire her and that she's going strong and that she's kept this building and building. Um, I think this kind of surprises for me happen as I start doing research for my art and I learn about different things that I need to include in the book. So the surprises are less about Eva's personality or Eva's accomplishments and more about things like who knew that there's different kinds of worms, things like that. So I had a lot of little surprises as I was working on the art.
Well,
Um,
that's great. Why don't we jump into so Jackie tells stories with words and you tell stories with pictures and art. So can you share about how creating art for storytelling might be different than other art showcases?
yes, I'm going to share my screen. So any illustrator, when they are working on a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, they're creating a world, a visual world. And so they have the responsibility to think about all the different parts of that world. And when it's a nonfiction book, I have to work with a real place, a real person, real critters, real plants. And so it requires that I do some research so that I can honor all those elements of the story. So I began by hunting down any kind of picture I could find. And this is just a tiny, tiny representation. I keep folders and folders and folders of images. So I have a whole folder of different kinds of critters, a whole folder of different kinds of herbs, a folder of different views of Eva, and a different folder of her farm and house, of her friends. And so this is just a representative of how creating art for a story is different than just creating any old kind of art.
Great. What's your favorite color or pattern? And you may
Um,
want to describe some of the colors and patterns from the book.
well, in fact, I probably if I was my personal favorite color for things I like to wear, things I like to look at is blue. But as an artist, I work with all kinds of colors and all kinds of patterns and textures. And so I wanted to just highlight some of the things, and I hope people will look for these, hunt for them in the book, because there's a lot of different kinds of things that anyone can find for free all around them. For instance, I have a kind of ridiculous collection of repurposed envelopes. So I noticed at some point when you receive business envelopes that they have patterns inside. And I think the idea is that it helps sort of camouflage whatever's inside. But sometimes they're different colors. Like you see, there's even a red pattern, and there's lots of ones that have blue or black, sometimes green. And these became patterns that I used. You might find them on a plaid shirt in the book. You might find them on the speckles of a chicken. So there's lots of repurposed papers. I also repurpose packaging papers, parchment baking paper, different kinds of envelopes. So you can find a lot of these different things in here. And I organize my papers. I have lots of other papers. Like anytime I receive a present that has tissue paper, I save the tissue paper. And so I organize everything in drawers of color, and I save tiniest scraps of things because you never know when I'll use them. And they're jammed into these drawers that I have. When I'm working on, let's see, cutting my paper, because I use a lot of collage, I have a variety of kinds of tools. Tiny, tiny scissors are really good for cutting small details. Sometimes I want some kind of decorative edges, so I have lots of scissors that have decorative cuts. And I also use punches, or the decorative punches, for some of the things. And so those are also can be found in the book. And then while I'm talking about my technique for working with these, I'll just share one more thing that I do. Is I do a bit of stencil printing throughout the book. And I like to use kind of things that are at hand. And so instead of buying fancy stencil paper, I just grab the box of wax paper and I cut openings, and then I roll out ink on a nonstick surface with a color of ink I like, and I roll through the openings that I've created in the wax paper, and so I get some printing. And I'm just going to show you one piece from the book so that you can see sort of all of those happening. You can see that I've used my visual research here so I can accurately depict Eva and her farm. I've used some of those repurposed papers I described. Like if you look at the basket in Eva's arms, that's some sort of bubbly packaging material that I thought looked like a basket. And then sometimes I use scissors, like you can see where I've cut out Eva's shirt. That's a very crisp kind of line, and her hat. But then sometimes I rip paper for soft edges, like all the trees, the foliage in the trees, that's kind of softer. So that worked. I do that with ripping. And then I use my punches sometimes for cutting out things, like you can see the petals and that purpley petals in the foreground, or the lettuces going back into space. And then I use the stencil printing to print like the clouds and the birds there. So you can see all those things happening, and you can look for other examples in the book.
That's wonderful, Christy. And it's
Thank you.
important to share that because a lot of our elementary school age students here in North Carolina do a lot of collage art. And then with North Carolina Ag in the Classroom, we've got STEM challenges where we tell them to grab the recycling bin to build things, build models of things. So I love that you're using recycled materials and that you're using what you have available. And I like the concept we don't have to buy fancy things to make art or tell a story. And I think that's a really great point.
I also think it's just an important idea to get in the mindset that everything can be a resource, and resources can be used in different ways.
Yes, absolutely. Jackie, I asked Christy what her favorite thing was, and I'd like to ask you what your favorite book is or was as a child.
Oh, that is such a good question. And I brought a book to show you. We did not have individual books in our house. In fact, I was thinking this morning, I don't think I was in a bookstore. Oh, maybe until I was like 15 or 16 years old. But we had this collection of books, which I think was quite popular in maybe in the years when my mother was a teenager or a young wife. They were called Bookhouse books, and they had a lot of stories in them and excerpts from stories. And the funny thing is, when I look at these books, I feel like I'm 10 years old again.
Oh,
These were the books we had, and we read these stories over and over again because it's what we had to read. But I actually don't think, I'll just show you this too. It's bad to reread stories. I think it's good to get them in our heads so that they are what C.S. Lewis called the furniture of our minds.
I love
So
that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of when we rewatch a movie or read a book that we read as a kid, and it's very different as an adult than it was as a
yes.
child. So I'm with you on that. I think it's important to cherish those memories. Um, so I'll ask you one North Carolina related question and then we'll finish up with one last question. But have you ever been to North Carolina, Jackie or Christy?
I have not ever been to North Carolina.
Is there any place that you've heard of that you wish you could visit in North Carolina?
I wrote a book. I brought it down to share with you. Let's see if I can find it. Called Good Times on Grandfather Mountain. I did not know there was a Grandfather Mountain,
Mhm.
but there is in North Carolina.
Mhm.
So I would love to go to Grandfather Mountain.
You should go. It's very, very beautiful. That's great. I love that. And so finally, I'd like to wrap up with is there something that you hope students or maybe even adults learn from reading Farmer Eva?
I'd like to comment on that. I think that there's a wonderful connectedness of everything. And to me, it's clear in Jackie's writing and in Eva's life, how that community is beyond just people. It extends to all creatures. And um, there's just a respect for everything in our world. And I think that we would all benefit for carrying that away with us. Yeah.
Oh, that was wonderful, Christy. I agree. Uh, the connectedness in the soil, how the microbes help the plants and the plants help the microbes, that they all help each other to survive. And um, so that's one piece about the book that I love and I hope others pick up on. Um, the other piece that I really love about Eva's life is just the magic of growing seeds, the magic of planting a seed and something grows. And we can all experience that magic if we have a plant pot and a little bit of dirt, if we have a patch in our yards, wherever we are, we can see that. And every time it happens, it's exciting. Some little thing like a tomato seed, as small as a dot of an eye practically, grows into this huge plant that gives us tomatoes.
That is
That's
wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. That is so nice. And you're so right. And I loved what you said about everything is interconnected. And I think that is a theme for all of us. We all rely on each other and should depend on each other. And ladies, thank you so much for joining me today and answering these questions. And for all of you watching, I hope that you'll get your copy of Farmer Eva's Green Garden Life and enjoy that this month and evermore. Thank you.